Chris Hipkins.
Excellent choice. Mr. Chair, can I begin by also offering my congratulations to the Minister and the Chair, John Boscawen. And I understand this, of course, is a very significant day for him. It's the first day that he is sitting in the chair as a Minister presiding over a piece of legislation. Also, I believe, and I haven't had this checked out, the first day he has ever spoken in the House where he hasn't uttered the initials of the ETS. I'm sure that's still to come. I did look through the bill and I couldn't work out where he might be able to fit that in. So we might actually get through a whole piece of legislation where we hear from Mr. Boscawen, but we don't hear about the ETS. And so I appreciate that this will be a very significant day for him, Mr. Chair. I'd also like to acknowledge the former Minister, Heather Roy, and I'm sure that she presided over this piece of legislation very conscientiously during the time that she was a Minister, and very thoroughly, as she was well known for doing. Mr. Chair, I want to primarily talk about the consumer information notices that are required to be displayed in vehicles, and I actually want to ask some questions, either of the Minister or of one of the other members of the Select Committee, because I have to say, having read through the bill, having gone back to the Principal Act itself, and having read through some of the various information that's provided by the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, I know I'm a bit of a geek, it's actually not particularly easy to follow what the impact of this change will make. Now, as I read it, it's about reducing the sort of compliance cost for someone who's privately trading a motor vehicle, that they won't have to display a consumer information notice as they would if they were a registered car dealer. As I read the Principal Act, one of the primary pieces of information supplied in that consumer information notice is a statement that the vehicle is being sold without any finance conditions attached to it. And what I want to know, either from the Minister or from someone else who's on the Select Committee, is what protections, if any, somebody trading a vehicle privately has. Now, it could well be that even if a consumer information notice had to be displayed as it was previously, that there was actually no protection for someone doing a private vehicle transaction in terms of those financing provisions. So someone could purchase a vehicle from somebody else on a private transaction and actually find that money was still owed on that vehicle by that person, and therefore that vehicle could have been taken off them. I understand from reading the Act that if it's purchased from a private motor vehicle, from a registered motor vehicle dealer, they have to provide a statement saying that there are no financing conditions, and therefore any liability for any previous financing conditions would actually rest with the registered motor vehicle dealer rather than with the person who purchases the vehicle. But I just want to get some clarification of where people lie in terms of a private transaction of motor vehicle dealing. I was quite surprised when I looked up the information on a consumer information notice that it didn't necessarily supply all of the information that I had thought it would. I'd always thought of the consumer information notices as the little things that hang in the window of the car when you go to a car dealer to buy one, and therefore everything that was on that consumer information notice was required by the law. And I understand now, having read the information around this, that that's not actually the case, that not all of the information supplied on the notice actually does have to be supplied. It's simply supplied for ease of reference by the motor vehicle dealers. So some clarification around that from the Minister would be quite useful. The reason I'm particularly interested in the private transactions is not most, but a significant number of car trading happens over forums like Trade Me or through private vehicle sales. I think that's actually going to become increasingly the case. We're seeing it even in housing sales now. People are increasingly trading their houses over the internet through Trade Me without the involvement of real estate agents, and I think increasingly we're going to see more cars being traded without the involvement of car dealers. So making sure we get this law really clear and making sure people are clear of their rights, their obligations and so on is quite important. Listening to Claire Curran speaking before, I was reflecting on the number of cars that I have owned, and I've owned 5 cars, Mr. Chair, and I have owned 5 cars. My first car was a Mitsubishi Lancer, which was older than I am. It was a 1977 Mitsubishi Lancer. It's a year older than I was, but I purchased that one privately. The next car that I owned was a Mitsubishi Starion. That was my favourite car. No, not quite. Hang on a minute. That was also purchased through a private sale. The next car that I own, Nissan Terrano, I still own that. That's good fun. I did actually buy that from Mr. Chair. Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I did actually... that's right, it's good. It's good. It's worth it. I did actually purchase that from a licensed motor vehicle dealer. That is, in fact, the only car that I've ever purchased from a licensed motor vehicle dealer was the one, the Nissan Terrano, which I still own. I then bought a big Ford Transit van for the election campaign last time. That was a private trade, and that was a very, very unsuccessful transaction. It had my face painted all over the side of it. The only problem is it didn't go, and so we had to tow it everywhere, and that wasn't a particularly useful addition to my election campaign. So that went by the wayside not long after the election, and I then got a little. It was a non-starter, but I still won. So I then traded that down for a little Nissan S-Cargo, which is one of those little bubble cars. It's down in the basement quite often. People will see it down there. The bigger van wouldn't have fitted in the basement, actually, so it was a good trade because it means that I can drive it to work. But that was also purchased, Mr. Chair, through a private transaction. So I'm probably not atypical of somebody my age who has owned 5 cars in the 15 years that I've been driving. I actually got my driver's licence when I was 15, yeah. And 16 years, actually. I just did the maths. 16 years, actually. A bit slow on the maths. That's never been a strong point for me. But of the 5 cars that I have owned, 4 have been purchased through private arrangements. So to some extent, this removal of the consumer information notice would have an impact on me. Younger people, I'm willing to throw this out there. I have absolutely no evidence for it, but that's all right. I don't have much evidence for anything else I've said today. That younger people are probably more likely to be purchasing motor vehicles in private transactions rather than purchasing through motor vehicle dealers. I think as we go through, what we'll see is that the lower value vehicles tend to be exchanged through private sales, through classified advertising, Trade Me, whatever. And actually, if you're going to a car yard, you're typically spending probably $5,000 or more. If you're buying a vehicle for $500, you're actually going to be doing it through a private sale. And younger people are more likely to be those in that category. So this is very important for them. They'll be maybe purchasing their first cars. It's important that they are aware of all of their rights and obligations through that process. So I'm hoping that the Minister will be able to take a call and clear up. I think it's probably quite a simple matter that he'll be able to clear up for me around these consumer information notices, what they actually need to contain, and where people are left with regard to previous financing arrangements where it's a private motor vehicle sale. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair. Grant Robertson.
No other